Doug, your head's cut off in the picture.
Oh,
Just want to let you know.
thank you, sister. Oh, my goodness. Oh, thank you so much. Ready, Mom?
Yep, already.
All right.
Okay, Habbakuk, chapter 1. The oracle that Habbakuk the prophet received. It's entitled Habbakuk's Complaint. How long, O Yahuwah, must I call for help? But you did not listen, or cry out to you, violence, but you do not save. Why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrong? Destruction and violence are before me. There is strife and conflict abounds. Therefore, the law is paralyzed, and justice never prevails. The wicked hem in the righteous, so that justice is perverted. Yahuwah's answer. Look at the nations and watch and be utterly amazed, for I am going to do something in your days that you would not believe even if you were told. I am raising up the Babylonians, that ruthless and impetuous people who sweep across the whole earth to seize dwelling places not their own. They are a feared and dreaded people. They are a law to themselves and promote their own honor. Their horses are swifter than leopards, fiercer than wolves at dusk. Their cavalry gallops headlong. Their horsemen come from afar. They fly like a vulture swooping to devour. They all come bent on violence. Their hordes advance like a desert wind and gather prisoners like sand. They deride kings and scoff at rulers. They laugh at all fortified cities. They build earthen ramps and capture them. Then they sweep past like the wind and go on. Guilty men whose own strength is their mighty one. Habakkuk's second complaint. O Yahuwah, are you not from everlasting? My Elohim, my set-apart one. We will not die. O Yahuwah, you have appointed them to execute judgment. O Rock, you have ordained them to punish. Your eyes are too pure to look on evil. You cannot tolerate wrong. Why then do you tolerate the treacherous? Why are you silent while the wicked swallow up those more righteous than themselves? You have made men like fish in the sea, like sea creatures that have no ruler. The wicked foe pulls all of them up with hooks. He catches them in his net. He gathers them up in his dragnet. And so he rejoices and is glad. Therefore, he sacrifices to his net and burns incense to his dragnet. For by his net he lives in luxury and enjoys the choicest food. Is he to keep on emptying his net, destroying nations without mercy? Chapter 2. I will stand at my watch and station myself on the ramparts. I will look to see what he will say to me and what answer I am to give to this complaint. Yahuwah's answer. Then Yahuwah replied, write down the revelation and make it plain on tablets, so that a herald may run with it. For the revelation awaits an appointed time. It speaks of the end and will not prove false. Though it linger, wait for it. It will certainly come and will not delay. See, he is puffed up. His desires are not upright, but the righteous will live by his faith. Indeed, wine betrays him. He is arrogant and never at rest, because he is as greedy as Sheol, and like death is never satisfied. He gathers to himself all the nations and takes captive all the peoples. Will not all of them taunt him with ridicule and scorn, saying, woe to him who piles up stolen goods and makes himself wealthy by extortion. How long must this go on? Will not your debtors suddenly arise? Will they not wake up and make you tremble? Then you will become their victim, because you have plundered many nations. The peoples who are left will plunder you, for you have shed man's blood, You have destroyed lands and cities and everyone in them. Woe to him who builds his realm by unjust gain, to set his nest on high, to escape the clutches of ruin. You have plotted the ruin of many peoples, shaming your own house and forfeiting your life. The stones of the wall will cry out, and the beams of the woodwork will echo it. Woe to him who builds a city with bloodshed and establishes a town by crime. Has not Yahuwah Almighty determined that the people's labor is only fuel for the fire, that the nations exhaust themselves for nothing? For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the esteem of Yahuwah as the waters cover the sea. Woe to him who gives drink to his neighbors, pouring it from the wineskin till they are drunk, so that he can gaze on their naked bodies. You will be filled with shame instead of esteem. Now it is your turn. Drink and be exposed. The cup of Yahuwah's right hand is coming around to you, and disgrace will cover your esteem. The violence you have done to Lebanon will overwhelm you, and your destruction of animals will terrify you. For you have shed man's blood. You have destroyed lands and cities and everyone in them. Of what value is an idol, since a man has carved it, or an image that teaches lies? For he who makes it trusts in his own creation. He makes idols that cannot speak. Woe to him who says to wood, come to life, or to lifeless stone, wake up. Can it give guidance? It is covered with gold and silver. There is no breath in it. But Yahuwah is in his set-apart temple. Let all the earth be silent before him. Okay, chapter 3, entitled Habakkuk's Prayer. A prayer of Habakkuk, the prophet of Shigionoth. Yahuwah, I have heard of your fame. I stand in awe of your deeds, O Yahuwah. Renew them in our day. In our time, make them known. In wrath, remember mercy. Elohim came from Teman, the set-apart one from Mount Paran. His esteem covered the heavens, and his praise filled the earth. His splendor was like the sunrise, rays flashed from his hand, where his power was hidden. Plague went before him, pestilence followed his steps. He stood and shook the earth. He looked and made the nations tremble. The ancient mountains crumbled and the age-old hills collapsed. His ways are eternal. I saw the tents of Cushan in distress, the dwellings of Midian in anguish. Were you angry with the rivers, O Yahuwah? Was your wrath against the streams? Did you rage against the sea when you rode with your horses and your victorious chariots? You uncovered your bow. You called for many arrows. You split the earth with rivers. The mountains saw you and writhed. Torrents of sea swept by. The deep roared and lifted its waves on high. Sun and moon stood still in the heavens. At the glint of your flying arrows, at the lightning of your flashing spear. In wrath you strode through the earth, and in anger you threshed the nations. You came out to deliver your people, to save your anointed one. You crushed the leader of the land of wickedness. You stripped him from head to toe. With his own spear you pierced his head. When his warriors stormed out to scatter us, floating as though about to devour, the wretched who were in hiding, you trampled and in anger,
My bad, Mom.
you trampled the sea with your horses, churning the great waters. I heard, and my heart pounded. My lips quivered at the sound. Decay crept into my bones, and my legs trembled. Yet I will wait patiently for the day of calamity to come on the nation invading us. Though the fig tree does not bud, and there are no grapes on the vines, though the olive crop fails, and the fields produce no food, though there are no sheep in the pen and no cattle in the stalls. Yet I will rejoice in Yahuwah. I will be joyful in Yahuwah, my Savior. The sovereign Yahuwah is my strength. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer. He enables me to go on the heights. That's it.
All right. So let's see here. Pretty short book, but a very powerful book.
Yeah.
So what's interesting, all these prophetic books are kind of around the same time. I'm seeing a theme today around the time of like Darius and all that, and around the time of Ezra and Nehemiah.
Excuse me.
So let's see here. Cut timber. Oh. Consider your
Hey, bro,
way.
that's Haggai.
Oh yeah. Isn't that what did my mom just read? She
Habakkuk. That's what you told me.
Oh, Habbakuk. Oh, my bad. Habbakuk. My bad. My bad about that. All right, so let's see here. So there's a lot of partiality being referred to here in verse 3, taking bribes. No. So this is something that we're going to see no longer in the millennial, in my opinion. You're going to have the wicked prevailing against the righteous. That's not going to happen anymore. Because Yahuwah, I truly believe Yahuwah is going to bring back the whole judicial system he had back in the Tanakh. You're going to have stoning again, all that. There will be no more perverting right ruling and all that. It's interesting. So he talks about the Chaldeans out of nowhere. I wonder if this is a context would be the same context as Isaiah 13. Oh no, actually, no, this would be different context. So this would almost be like pre-captivity, it looks like. I stir up the Chaldeans, the bitter, hasty nation that walks on the breadth of the earth to inherit tabernacles. Not, oh yeah, this is definitely talking about, I think the Habbakuk 1 would be like the time of Jeremiah when Yahuwah brings Nebuchadnezzar against his own people. So he's actually using the Chaldeans here in chapter 1 of Habakkuk. He is terrible, famous. His right ruling shall proceed of himself, and his dignity shall come out of himself. So obviously talking about Nebuchadnezzar there. His horses shall bound more swiftly than leopards, and they're fiercer than the wolves of Arabia. His horsemen shall ride forth and shall rush from far. They shall fly, and as an eagle hasten to eat. You know what I find interesting? Because we see the beasts of Daniel, right? In this chapter of Habakkuk 1, you have, especially verse 8 here, he's mentioning his horses are swifter than leopards. Leopard was like one of the beasts, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you have, it's saying that they shall fly as an eagle hasting to eat. So I wonder if Yahuwah is like trying to point us that to Daniel here with Habakkuk 1:8. I don't know. It could be just a coincidence, but I just find it interesting. And you see in Jeremiah too, right? Doesn't he describe Nebuchadnezzar as a lion with eagle's wings in Jeremiah 4 or something like that? Yeah, like it's really interesting. So it seems like he's pointing to the Babylon kingdom there. Destruction shall come upon wicked men, resisting their adverse front. I don't know what that means. And he shall gather the captivity as the sand. That's interesting. Verse 9 is pretty important. So he's talking about gathering the captivity as the sand. I would assume that's the captivity of his own people. He shall be as ease with the kings, princes are his toys, shall mock at every stronghold. So a lot of stronghold talk today in this portion. Shall change his, then he shall change his spirit. He shall pass through and make an atonement, saying this strength belongs to my Elohim. Now that is interesting. I wonder who he's referring to that's doing that. That's interesting.
Boy, he had a lot
I
of
wonder if that's talking about the conversion of Nebuchadnezzar, you think?
possibly.
It says
Yes.
he will change his spirit.
Uh-huh.
He shall pass through and make an atonement, saying, this strength belongs to my Elohim. I wonder if that's like supposed to be foreshadowing in Daniel where Nebuchadnezzar becomes like a beast, and he's like, now I give honor to the Elohim of heaven and all that. I kind of wonder. Are you not from the beginning, O Yahuwah Elohim, my set apart one? Surely we shall not die. Yahuwah, you have established it for right ruling, and he has formed me to chasten with his correction. His eyes too pure to behold evil things. Okay. And will you make men as the fishes of the sea? That's interesting. Because we see Yahusha talking about, I will make you fishers of men. So here it's saying in Habbakuk 1:14, will you make men like the fish of the sea? That's kind of interesting. Make a little note of that. Men allegorized as fish. Now, what doesn't make sense here in the Septuagint, it says, as the reptiles which have no guide. I don't get that. I don't know why reptiles is there. It's a little weird there. He has brought up destruction with a hook and drawn one with a casting net and caught another in his drags. Therefore, shall his heart rejoice and be glad. Therefore, will he sacrifice to his drag?
You know what Wick says about this book? It was written right at the time of the Babylonian captivity. It was written between
that's what I was thinking.
And 597.
That's what I was thinking, because he's describing Nebuchadnezzar earlier in chapter 1.
Yeah, no, that makes all sense. That makes sense.
Yeah. Therefore will he cast his net and will not spare to slay the nations continually. Interesting little commentary by the Hebraic Roots Bible. End time Babylon will conquer any nation that she sees as a threat to her, and since she is the only world superpower, Jeremiah 50:23, no one can do much to stop her. And then it talks about verse 10 of that same chapter. Interesting. Make a little note of that. I'll test that later to see if that's true.
I just find it interesting in how much, what's the word I'm looking for, strength or vigor that he had in speaking with Yahuwah. I mean, he did not bite his tongue. He came right out there. And you know what? I believe that Yahuwah honors that if it's done in a righteous way. Yeah.
Mount upon the rock, watch to see what he will say to me, yada, yada, yada. Yahuwah answered me and said, write the vision and that plainly on the tablet. Interesting, the word plainly is there. That he that reads it may run. For the vision is yet for a time, and it shall shoot forth at the end. This kind of reminds me of Daniel here in Habbakuk 2, that the vision's for a future time, and not in vain, though he should tarry, wait for him. He will surely come and will not tarry. Interesting. So it's kind of like hinting at the mockers that are going to say, where's his second coming? How Second Chronicles talks about that. Where's his second coming? For our fathers have slept. Our fathers have gone down to Sheol and everything has stayed the same.
Yep.
If he should draw back. Now, this is my favorite verse from Habbakuk in the Septuagint. If he should draw back, my soul has no pleasure in him. Meaning, if he goes back into his sin, a dog returning to his vomit, I will have no pleasure in him. But the righteous shall live by what? My, not just faith, my faith. Huge difference than the Masoretic. They leave out my there, the word my. But the arrogant man and scorner, the boastful man, shall not finish anything. Who has enlarged his desire as the grave?
Excuse me.
And like death, he is never satisfied. He will gather to himself all the nations and will receive to himself all the peoples. Certain groups out there might want to pay attention to that verse. All peoples. All means all, okay? Not just physical descendants of Israel, okay? All means all. What did Rob Skiba used to say? He'd be like, 100% of the time, all means all, okay? You can't get around that. Okay. All right. Shall not all these take up a parable against him and a proverb to tell against him? And they shall say, woe to him that multiplies to himself the possessions which are not his. How long? And who heavily loads his yoke? We just talked about this off the record today about heavy yokes and all that. For suddenly there shall rise up those that bite him. They that plot against you shall awake, and you shall be a plunder to them. Okay, so it talks about that. Spoil many nations. So this is hinting to the end times, where the Gentiles will be under Yashrael, and those that afflicted them, they shall afflict, and all that. Woe to him that covets any evil covetousness to his house, that he may set his nest on high, that he may be delivered from the power of evils. You have devised shame to your house. You have utterly destroyed many nations. Your soul has sinned. For the stone shall cry out of the wall, and the beetle out of the timber shall speak. That's interesting. I would like to see that literally, if that's literal. A beetle speaking. I would like to see that. Woe to him that builds a city with blood and establishes a city by unrighteousness. America. Are not these things of Yahuwah Almighty? Surely many people have been exhausted in the fire. Many nations have fainted. For the earth shall be filled with the knowledge of the steam of Yahuwah, shall cover them as water. Woe to him that gives his neighbor to drink the thick lees of wine. What would that be? Thick lees of wine. Interesting. And intoxicates him, that he may look upon their secret parts. Drink thou also your full of disgrace instead of esteem. Shake, O heart, quake, the cup of the right hand of Yahuwah has come upon you. So this is interesting. This reminds me of Revelations. And even the Hebraic Roots Bible puts it there, where you can find that in Revelations. It seems like the cup of Yahuwah's wrath is the cup of fornication. It's like the same cup, which is kind of interesting parallel. So it's actually saying the right hand of Yahuwah is giving her the cup.
Yes, that's what my Bible says.
That's interesting, because that means Yahusha is giving Babylon her cup to drink. It's like, go ahead, drink it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, get drunk from it. Go ahead. Right before she's destroyed. So very interesting. I'm going to write those cross references down. Jeremiah 51:7, Revelation 17:4. So one thing I do like about the Hebraic Root Bible's notes, they do give you a lot of cross references for support of their commentary. See here. For wickedness of Lebanon shall cover you in distress, because the wild beast shall dismay you, because of the blood of men, sins of the land and city, and all that dwell in it. What profit is the graven image that they have graven it? One has made it a molten work, a false image, for the maker has trusted in his work to make dumb idols. Woe to him that says to the wood, awake, arise, and to the stone, be thou exalted. Whereas it is an image, and this is a casting of gold and silver, and there is no breath in it. But Yahuwah is in his set-apart temple. Let all the earth fear before him. That's probably like my favorite verse of this portion here. He's in his set-apart temple. Let all the earth fear before him.
Well, I like the end where I started losing it. That's one of my favorite. One of my favorite portions.
Oh yeah, the song. That's why there's a song in chapter 3. I see why you lost it there. Okay, yeah. So
it's just a very powerful scripture.
So it's very interesting. A lot of his wrath is being talked about in chapter 3. What's interesting is verse 10 talks about Yahuwah. Why did he, as you did, divide the moving waters? So that's interesting. The deep uttered her voice. So that would mean the waters below, the waters of the abyss can talk. Interesting. Kind of stuff we don't think about. We look at the Eretz, the ground, like, oh, it's not alive. The Sheol's not alive, but yet it's talking about the waters of Sheol talking. It's interesting. The sun was exalted, and the moon stood still in her course. Your darts shall go forth at the light, at the brightness of the gleaming of your arms. You will bring low the land with threatening, and in wrath you will break down the nations. You went forth for the salvation of your people to save your anointed. That's interesting. I wonder if the Masoretic has that there. Huh.
This is interesting.
Yeah, the Masoretic's a little different. I guess it's like making the anointed with your anointed. I don't know. It's like weird. I don't know. That's a little weird. That could be just a translation issue, but interesting. Because under the head of the princes with the basement.
So Taman is in Edom.
Yeah, Taman's part of the possession of the Edomites
here.
Yeah.
Having to do with Esau too, the grandson named after the grandson of Esau.
Now, what's interesting is talking about cutting as under the heads of the princes with amazement. I wonder if there's a significance why cutting of the heads is being mentioned. I just find it interesting because supposedly the giants, that's the only way they die is you cut off their head. So I don't know. I don't know if there's a connection there, but I just find it interesting. Yeah, go ahead, Brother Joshua.
If that word princes is, I'm wondering if it should actually be principalities, because if it's saying he cut off the heads of the principalities, that would kind of parallel with he cut off the head of the dragon or the heads of the dragon. I think it's in Psalms.
Yeah, the heads of the dragon singular. Yeah, which goes into the topic of mythological creatures, a dragon that has multiple heads. The Hydra in Greek mythology has like that type of appearance where it's a dragon.
Also, while that could definitely be the case, and I could also see it being the heads of the dragon being
princes, like
the different heads of Satan, or the different people that he has used. Used in the earth.
Yeah, that would agree with the prophetic interpretation of what a head is here, or a horn. Yeah. What's interesting is the AVP Plus says the word here should not be princes but mighty ones, which would definitely go back to the giants. That would go back to the idea of you could say a ruler or officer, but giants were also considered mighty ones too, especially in the case of Nimrod. He was a mighty one, Gibborim. So it's many different possibilities. I personally think this could be referring to like these hybrid giants cutting off their heads, because David cut off the head of Goliath. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting to note is the red-headed giant they found in Afghanistan. The only way the U.S. Army was able to kill him, they had chopped off his head and he fell. Mm-hmm. So there's something about their heads. If you don't cut off their head, they're still going to fight you. For some reason they don't die unless their head's cut off, unless their circulation to the brain, I guess, has something to do with it.
Doug, doesn't it say that Nimrod became as a mighty warrior, not that he was a mighty warrior?
No, it says like he became one. Let me see here. I'm going to go to Genesis 10 here. It says, and in the Septuagint, instead of mighty warrior, it's actually really specific. It says a giant. And Cush begot Nimrod. He began to be, meaning something happened to make him one. He began to be a giant upon the earth. And it's not just that, he hunted other giants for some reason. He was a giant hunter before Yahuwah Elohim. And actually the word before in the Hebrew and the Greek both indicate it should not be before, it should be against. He was a giant hunter against Yahuwah Elohim. Therefore, they say as Nimrod, the giant hunter against Yahuwah. So he basically hunted his own kind when he began to be a giant, which, by the way, you can, in my opinion, you can see proof of that 4 chapters later, which I believe this guy, this king of Shinar, in my opinion, is Nimrod. It's just another name for him, Amraphel, king of Shinar. And right, I think it's down to verse 7 or 8 where it talks about they went against these other kings. They slaughtered the Rephaim. See here where it talks about it in this chapter. The mountains of Mount Seir. In the 14th year came Chedorlaomer, the kings with him, including Amraphel, and cut to pieces the giants in Ashtaroth and Karnaim and the strong nations with them, and Omeans in the city save. So the general consensus by me and other people that would have lived around the time of Yahusha and even a little bit after, they believe that historically this was Nimrod, Amraphel, king of Shinar. One example is one of the Targums even calls Amraphel, king of Shinar, Nimrod in Genesis 14. Also, the book of Jasher is an extra biblical witness, added witness to the Targums calling him Amraphel, king of Shinar. So it seems like he's the same person, which actually would put validity on Genesis 10:8 in the Septuagint, calling him a giant and a giant hunter. So just thought I would mention that. So yeah, he literally became a giant. And sometimes the giants were mighty ones. They were looked at as mighty ones. We talked about this off topic last night. Historically, the giants were worshipped as deities or mighty ones by their own kind. Like the Canaanites would have worshipped these hybrid giants as gods, quote unquote. That would have been their gods. That's why they worshipped Nimrod under Dagon. The Philistines were giants. They worshipped Nimrod as the person Dagon. And many different cultures either worshipped Nimrod as their deity, or they had other deities who were giants, that were physical giants that actually lived and actually existed. Like Hercules was a giant that actually existed. Many of the Greek deities in their pantheon were either, at one point, they were either fallen angels or giants. They were one or the other. Most of the pantheon that they worship today in Greece and Rome come from either the Watchers or their children. So that's just a historical fact. When you study the ancient mythologies and all that and how it ties in with scripture, that's what happened. So that we're not taught that. We're taught that, the deities just didn't exist. These lesser deities didn't exist. They just never existed. But yet scripture talks about constantly that Yahuwah put principalities over each nation after the Tower of Babel, that he actually put real existing heavenly messengers, Malachim, over these Gentile nations. It even says in Deuteronomy 4:19, just to prove a point here, it even says that he allowed these Gentile nations to worship the angels. It says right here, Deuteronomy 4:19, lest having looked up to the sky and having seen the sun, the moon, and the stars, and all the heavenly bodies, you should go astray and worship them and serve them, which Yahuwah your Elohim has given to all the nations under heaven. But Yahuwah took you and led you forth out of the land of Egypt, out the iron furnace, out of Egypt, to be to him a people of inheritance, as at this day. So basically what Deuteronomy 4 is talking about, it's giving a backdrop historically to what happened after the Tower of Babel. Those nations wanted to worship Nimrod as their deity, and so Yahuwah gave them into a reprobate mind to worship the host of heaven. Basically is what happened.
So Doug, I have a question. So when it says that he started to become, will that imply that before he became what he was more friendly or connected to the Father, and then he started to become what he became?
Yeah, I would say it's a spiritual and physical. I wouldn't take away from the genetic part of it. That he became a mighty one or became a giant means that he wasn't originally a giant or a hybrid, meaning that he was fully 100% human. Somehow he did something to himself to become a hybrid. Somehow. If you look at the Greek and the Hebrew, both of that word became kind of indicates he did some weird type of thing to become that. Like it's Rob Skiba found himself, he found in the original languages of the Greek and the Hebrew of that word in Genesis 10 that it even could hint to like a sexual connotation, that he might have did something to change his genetics to become what he became. Because we have no reason to believe he was born of Nephilim seed. He was not. He was a human. He was fully human, fully mortal. And I guess you could look at extra biblical texts would hint to what Sister Marissa is saying, that he wasn't always evil. Seems to hint to that in a certain extra biblical book that I don't consider scripture, but I do consider it interesting historical resource that is based upon Judean midrash, pretty much. This idea that Nimrod was righteous at some point in time early in his life, and he became wicked. He started getting puffed up and prideful. Probably that my theory would be that's when he started to corrupt himself genetically, is maybe he got a whisper in his ear from some spiritual being. That, why should you worship him? You could be worshiped, type of thing. That's just hearsay. I can't really prove it. I'm not preaching his doctrine. I'm just saying that's my theory. My theory is that he's kind of like a Judas, in my opinion. He's kind of, I see a lot of connections between the beast and Judas. They're the only two people in scripture that's called the son of perdition. The only two people ever in scripture called that. Judas seems to be a type of the anti-Messiah for some reason. He's like, you could say, a type of the anti-Messiah, the Antichrist. And I believe Nimrod will be the original Antichrist. Nimrod will be the one in the end times to rise up and be in that third temple in the land. So I do think there's some weird parallel even in their journeys, how Judas pretended to be a follower and then, he showed his true colors. And I just wonder if Nimrod was the same, like he pretended to serve Yahuwah and be righteous. And then once he got all the fame, all the riches, all the, being a first world emperor, then all of a sudden, oh yeah, his true color showed. That's just a theory of mine. But either way, scripture does prove that genetically he changed himself. He definitely, he was not always a giant. Looking at the word began, what that word began means. So he was born human and somehow he began to be a giant. But anyway, very good question. So let's continue on here. I think we're now at the last part of our prophets portion today, which is Second Chronicles 35 to 36. So let me see here. I think Shoshana hasn't read today. I was wondering, Shoshana, if you could possibly read chapters 35 to 36 of Second Chronicles. Let's see here.
There. I was muted. Yeah, I'll be glad to read it.
Okay.
Second Chronicles, what chapter?
35 to 36.
Okay. Okay. And Yeshayahu performed a Pesach to Yahweh in Jerusalem, and they slew the Pesach on the 14th day of the first new moon. And he set the priests in their duties and strengthened them for the service of the house of Yahweh, and said to the Levites who were teaching all Yisrael, who were set apart to Yahweh, put the set apart ark in the house which Shlomo, son of Daud, sovereign of Yisrael, built. It is no longer to be a burden on your shoulders. Now serve Yahweh your Elohim and his people Yisrael. and prepare by the fathers' houses according to your divisions by the writing of Daud, sovereign of Yisrael, and by the writing of Shlomo his son, and stand in the set apart place by the divisions of the fathers' houses of your brothers, the lay people, and the portion of the father's house of the Levites, and slay the Pesach, and set yourselves apart, and prepare for your brothers to do according to the word of Yahweh by the hand of Masha. And Yashayahu gave the lay people lambs and young goats from the flock, all the Pesaim for everyone present, to the number of 30,000 and 3,000 cattle. These were from the sovereign's possession. And his leaders contributed a voluntary offering to the people, to the priests, and to the Levites. Hilkiah and Zechariah and Yahiel, leaders of the house of Elohim, gave to the priests for the Pesahim 2,600 and 300 cattle, and Conaniah, his brothers Shemayahu and Nathaniel and Heshayahu and Yahiel and Jozabad, chiefs of the Levites, gave to the Levites for Pesahim 5,500 cattle. And the service was prepared, and the priests stood in their places, and the Levites in their divisions, according to the command of the sovereign. And they slew the Pesach, and the priests sprinkled out of their hands while the Levites were skinning. And they removed the ascending offerings to give them to the divisions of the fathers' houses of the lay people, to bring to Yahweh as it is written in the book of Masha, and the same with the cattle. So they roasted the Pesach with fire according to the right ruling, and they boiled the set apart offerings in pots, and in cauldrons, and in bowls, and brought them speedily to all the lay people. And afterward they prepared for themselves and for the priests, because the priests, the sons of Aharon, were offering ascending offerings and fat until night. So the Levites prepared for themselves and for the priests, the sons of Aharon. And the singers, the sons of Asaph, were in their places according to the command of Daud, and Asaph and Haman, and Yahuthan, the seer of the sovereign. And the gatekeepers at each gate did not have to leave their position, because their brothers the Levites prepared for them. And all the service of Yahweh was prepared that day, to perform the Pesach and to offer ascending offerings on the slaughter place of Yahweh, according to the command of sovereign Yashayahu. And the children of Yisrael, who were present, performed the Pesach at that time, and the festival of Matzah for 7 days. There had not been a Pesach performed in Yisrael like it since the days of Samuel the prophet, and none of the sovereigns of Yisrael had performed such a Pesach as Yashayahu performed, with the priests and the Levites and all Yehuda and Yisrael who were present, and the inhabitants of Jerusalem. In the 18th year of the reign of Yashayahu, this Pesach was performed. After all this, when Yashayahu had prepared the house, Necho, sovereign of Mizraim, came up to fight against Carchemish by the Euphrates, and Yashayahu went out against him, and he sent messengers to him, saying, "What have I to do with you, sovereign of Yehuda? I'm not coming against you this day, but against the house with which I am fighting. For Elohim commanded me to make haste. Leave Elohim alone, who is with me, lest he destroy you." However, Yashayahu would not turn his face from him, but disguised himself to fight against him, and did not listen to the words of Necho from the mouth of Elohim, and came to fight in the valley of Megiddo. And the archers shot at sovereign Yashayahu. And the sovereign said to his servants, "Take me away, for I am severely wounded." And his servants took him out of that chariot and put him in the second chariot that he had. And they brought him to Jerusalem. And he died there and was buried in one of the burial sites of his fathers. And all Yehuda and Jerusalem were mourning for Yashayahu. And Yashayahu lamented for Yashayahu. And Jeremiah lamented for Yashayahu. And to this day, all the singing men and the singing women speak of Yashayahu in their lamentations, and made it a law in Yisrael. And see, they are written in the laments. And the rest of the acts of Yashayahu and his loving commitment, according to what was written in the Torah of Yahweh, and his acts from the first to the last, see, they are written in the book of the sovereigns of Yisrael and Yahudah. Chapter 36. And the people of the land took Yehoahaz, son of Yashayahu, and set him up to reign in his father's place in Jerusalem. Yehoahaz was 23 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned for 3 new moons in Jerusalem. And the sovereign of Mitzrayim turned him aside in Jerusalem, and imposed in the land a levy of 100 talents of silver and a talent of gold. And the sovereign of Mitzrayim made his brother Eliakim sovereign over Yehuda and Jerusalem, and changed his name to Yehoiakim. And Necho took Yehoahaz, his brother, and brought him to Mitzrayim. And Yehoiakim was 25 years old when he began to reign. And he reigned for 11 years in Jerusalem. And he did evil in the eyes of Yahuwah his Elohim. Nebuchadnezzar, sovereign of Babel, came up against him and bound him in bronze shackles to take him away to Babel. And Nebuchadnezzar brought some of his utensils from the house of Yahweh to Babel and put them in his hekel at Babel. And the rest of the acts of Jehoiakim, the abominations which he did, and what was found against him, they are written in the book of the sovereigns of Yisrael and Yahudah. Then Jehoiakim, his son, reigned in his place. Jehoiakim was 8 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned in Jerusalem for 3 new moons and 10 days, and he did evil in the eyes of Yahweh. And at the turn of the year, sovereign Nebuchadnezzar sent and brought him to Babel with the valuable utensils from the house of Yahweh, and made Zedekiah, Jehoiakim's brother, sovereign over Yehuda and Jerusalem. Zedekiah was 21 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem. And he did evil in the eyes of Yahweh, his Elohim. He did not humble himself before Jeremiah the prophet, who spoke from the mouth of Yahweh. And he also rebelled against sovereign Nebuchadnezzar, who had made him swear by Elohim, but he stiffened his neck and hardened his heart against turning to Yahweh Elohim of Yisrael. Also, all the heads of the priests and the people trespassed more and more, according to all the abominations of the nations. And they defiled the house of Yahweh, which he had set apart in Jerusalem. And Yahweh Elohim of their fathers sent to them by his messengers, rising up early and sending them, for he had compassion on his people and on his dwelling place. But they were mocking the messengers of Elohim and despising his words and scoffing at his prophets, until the wrath of Yahweh arose against his people, until there was no healing. Therefore, he brought against them the sovereign of the Chaldeans, and he killed their young men with the sword in the house of their set apart place, and had no compassion on young man or maiden, on the aged or the weak. He gave all into his hand. And all ye utensils from the house of Elohim, great and small, and the treasures of the house of Yahweh, and the treasures of the sovereign, and of all his leaders, all those he brought to Babel. And they burned the house of Elohim, and broke down the wall of Jerusalem, and burned all its palaces with fire, and destroyed all its valuable utensils. And those who escaped from the sword he exiled to Babel, where they became servants to him and his sons until the reign of Persia, in order to fulfill the word of Yahweh by the mouth of Jeremiah, until the land had enjoyed her Sabbath. As long as she lay waste, she kept Shabbat, until 70 years were completed. And in the first year of Koresh, sovereign of Persia, in order to accomplish the word of Yahweh by the mouth of Jeremiah, Yahweh stirred up the spirit of Koresh, sovereign of Persia, so that he called out in all his reign, and also put it in writing, saying, Thus said Koresh, sovereign of Persia, Yahweh Elohim of the heavens has given me all the reins of the earth, and he has commanded me to build him a house in Jerusalem, which is in Yehuda. Whoever is among you of all his people, Yahweh's Elohim be with him, and let him go up.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in these two chapters. Wow.
Even the little kids could do evil in the eyes of Yahuwah. A little 8-year-old. It's amazing. It's truly amazing.
Yeah, that's why I do believe in original sin. The problem is that Christianity has perverted and manipulated that doctrine. That's why a lot of our brothers and sisters reject original sin when they come into Torah, is because Christianity, like, exaggerates it like they do everything. They exaggerate predestination with Calvinists. That's why people don't want to accept predestination when they come into Torah. So it's like throwing the baby out with the bathwater, as the old saying goes. So this is clearly showing that we're all born into sinful bodies. Okay, a child is not righteous just because it doesn't know sin, doesn't know what sin and righteousness is. Like, I see a lot of people trying to say that. That's incorrect. In my opinion, that's incorrect. Just because they don't know what sin is doesn't mean that they're born pure without any sinful inclinations. Okay, what happened to Adam and Kua genetically changed the DNA of mankind. Just to put it in the most simplest aspect, you are by nature, you're prone to listen to the devil over Yahuwah. I know that sounds harsh, but that's what happened from the fall. Okay, that's a fact. That's every baby that's born into this world is born into a sinful body. That's a fact. That's a biblical fact. Okay, so that is the doctrine of original sin, just to explain that, because I know a lot of our brothers and sisters come into this walk, they want to reject anything from Christianity, and they, like I said, throw out the baby with the bathwater. That is what original sin is. Original sin is the idea that when you're born, you're in a body that's prone to rebelling. Regardless whether you know what breaking the Torah is at a young age or what righteousness is, that doesn't matter. That really doesn't matter. That either way, you're prone to not wanting to listen to your parents, right? That's sin. Rebellion is sin. You rebelling again, you at even the age of 4 or 5 years old, saying, "Oh no, Daddy, I don't want to do this." That's sin. Okay. So that's the reality of it. Okay. We're born into sinful carnal flesh. That's what original sin is.
David even said, "I was sinful from my mother's womb."
Yeah. I don't like to use that verse because people take that out of context too and think that it was sin for him to be conceived in his mother. I've seen people twist that. So that's why I don't like to use that one, because people take that verse and get a whole weird doctrine out of it. So that's the only reason I don't use that verse. The verses I would use though is we're all fallen. Paul talks about in Romans that from the fall all the way to Moses, everyone was prone to sin as to the likeness of Adam's transgression. That's what the literal verse says. So that you could say a virus. When the fall happened, a virus passed on genetically to all mankind. No one's exempt from that. And so that's why the only way to save mankind was for the Almighty, who is perfect, to take on that sinful flesh, because only he in his perfection
is righteous enough,
can deny sin 110%. Hopefully that's making sense to you guys that are listening and viewing this study. Hopefully that's making some sense. Why? That's part of the reason why he had to come. That's part of the reason, because you can't send an imperfect being that is susceptible to sin to save the world that is full of sinners that fall short every day. It's impossible. An imperfect being is not going to be able to do that.
Right.
Okay. That's why Yahusha could not just be a man. Okay. People that say, well, he was just a perfect human. There's no such thing. There's no such thing. If you're just human, you're not divine at all. You cannot lead a sinless life where you've never sinned once in a day of your life. It's impossible. In this genetic defect that's within our DNA of these bodies, it's impossible. But a perfect being can do that. So that's the reason I'm bringing this up, to make sense of the fullness of what the Besorah is. Part of the Besorah is that a perfect being had to become a human, had to become mortal so that he could save us, because no imperfect being could save mankind. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. But I just wanted to explain original sin because I see a lot of people not wanting to accept original sin as biblical, and it is biblical. Just that Christianity misunderstands it and perverts it and adds to it. And so anyway, but just wanted to say that. Oh, go ahead, Brother Joshua. I see you got your hand up. I'm sorry, bro.
No worries. There's a couple differences I saw from the Masoretic and Septuagint. The first one was Second Chronicles 35. It's really small, but still kind of weird. It says, in the Masoretic, nevertheless, Josiah would not turn his face from him, but disguised himself that he might fight with him. The Septuagint says, rather than disguised himself that he might fight with him, it says he strengthened himself to fight against him. That's really weird. The second one that I saw, Second Chronicles 36, where it says Jehoiaz was 23 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 3 months in Jerusalem. Everything after that in verse 2 in the Septuagint is missing in the Masoretic. It says, and his mother's name was Metal, daughter of Jeremiah of Libnah, and he did that which was evil in the sight of Yahuwah, according to all that his fathers had done. And Pharaoh Necho bound him in Diblath in the land of Emoth, that he might not reign in Jerusalem. So it's missing his mother's, the account of his mother, who his mother was, and then everything after that. I didn't highlight it, so there was another one that seems to be missing his mother's account in the same chapter, but I forgot to highlight it. So, but yeah, there's a little bit missing in the Masoretic.
Yeah. Did you catch the Pharaoh Necho thing?
Is that missing in the Masoretic?
Yeah, the first instance of it is missing. Verse 2 is supposed to have his name.
Yeah, okay.
I
see that.
It's very weird because his name is there in the Septuagint, is not there in the Masoretic, and then the Masoretic anyway says his name a couple verses later. So it's like they removed his name from one place, but not every other place. It's like doesn't even make any sense. It's like why wouldn't you just leave it there? That to me, that makes no sense to remove his name, which to me is important because it tells you what time period this would be if Pharaoh Necho is Pharaoh over Egypt versus the other Pharaoh that I think is in Ezekiel 29 or what have it. I know there's a time period before this where there's a different Pharaoh before Necho, shortly before him. So to me, that's a pretty big difference. The fact that Necho is not mentioned in verse 2 when it starts talking about the Pharaoh. Verse 5, like you said, huge part of the verse is missing. You're talking about, like, I would say a good half of the verse is missing. It like I said, it talks about his mother's name, but it also talks about that I think it even talks about the northern kingdom here towards the end. It starts talking about that Yahuwah used the Chaldeans for his purpose. He used Nebuchadnezzar for his purpose, plundering the parties of the Syrians, so the Assyrians, plundering the parties of the Moabites. I don't think that's in the Masoretic either. And the children of Ammon and of Samaria. Samaria, by the way, was the capital of the northern house. So that's hinting that some of the northern house was taken into captivity by Babylon. That's something I never knew about. So that could literally be hinting that some of the northern house went to Babylon with the house of Judah. I don't know. I could be reading that wrong, but it seems like the fact that that's the capital of the northern tribes, that would definitely hint that some northern house Israelites went in with the house, with the southern house to that captivity. Maybe that's how you get. Maybe that's how you get some of these northern house guys coming back in the New Testament time period. They're called the Samaritans, basically. from my research. So this version in the Septuagint of verse 5 of Second Chronicles 36, this extra stuff that's not in the Masoretic seems to give an explanation.
You cut out, bro.
Oh, my bad. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. So what I was saying before is the verse 5, what the Masoretic is missing seems to allude to the Northern House, some of the Northern House guys actually being with the house of Judah in Babylon, possibly. And that could kind of link with the New Testament, why you got quote unquote Samaritans in the land at the New Testament time period, where the Samaritans pretty much are ostracized by the Southern House, and that's really, in my opinion, that's what's the story, the parable Yahusha uses between the brothers. The Prodigal Son Story is really the Samaritans, the Northern House, pretty much, spending all of Abba's, possession that they're given of the firstborn Baraka, you could say, and Yehuda being spiteful and being like, why are you giving him this feast? He wasted all the possessions you gave him, and you never even gave me a feast with my friends, so I don't know. I could be pulling too much into that without any proof, but I just find it interesting. So, evil sight of Yahuwah. I think that's about it for the Second Chronicles portion. I didn't see much else to get out of there, other than those differences that Brother Joshua already mentioned. What I found interesting, though, in chapter 35, verse 19, the Son of Man Bible cites that this would have happened in 622 BC. Verse 6 of chapter 36 would have been 598 BC, according to the translator of the Son of Man Bible. And also verse 9 of that same chapter would have been it has in parentheses 598 BC. So according to this translator, he's saying that these events would have happened at that time period. So something to look into, something to check to see if he's correct or not. But I just find it interesting. So now we're going to move forward finally to our last portion of the day here, guys. We're going to Revelations chapters 8 to 12. I think just to get us finished here, me and my mom will split it up. You okay?
Yeah, I was looking something up, but I'm fine.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Revelations 124.
No, 8 to 12. I'll start us off. It's okay. You can continue looking what you're looking at.
No, it's all right. I'm here.
All right. So I'm going to do Revelations 8 to 10, and you can do 11 and 12. Okay, so I'm going to read from the Aramaic Peshitta here. Revelations 8. Let me just increase the font size. That's kind of small. All right, there we go. Revelations 8 from the original Aramaic New Testament in plain English. Okay. The seventh seal and the golden censer. And when he opened the seventh seal, there was stillness in the heaven for about half an hour. I saw 7 heavenly messengers who were standing before Elohim, who were given 7 trumpets. And another heavenly messenger, or Malachim, came and stood over the altar and had a golden censer. And much incense was given to him to offer the prayers of all the set apart ones on the altar, which was before the throne. And the smoke of the incense went up with the prayers of the set apart ones from the hand of the Malach before Elohim. And the Malach took the censer and filled it with fire, which was upon the altar, and cast it over the earth. And there were thunders, voices, and lightnings, and earthquakes. That reminds me of Exodus there, where the earthquakes, voices, and thunderings where lightnings were happening when he went to Sinai. Okay, 7 trumpets. And the 7 heavenly messengers who had the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound. And the first sounded, and there was hail and mixed with water, and they were cast upon the earth, and a third of the earth was burned, and a third of the trees burned, and all the grass of the earth burned. And the second sounded, and there was a great burning mountain falling into the sea, and a third of the sea became blood. And a third of all the creatures that were in the sea that had breath died, and a third of the ships was destroyed. And the third sounded, and a great burning star fell from the sky like a blaze, and it fell on a third of the rivers and upon the springs of water. So if you ever wonder what a shooting star is, yeah, that's a fallen angel. Okay. The name of the star is called, this is interesting, Absinthian. My good old heathen days, absinthe. Yeah, So I guess that's where they get the Greek word absinthe for that type of green liquor you sometimes see in movies. Yeah, very intoxicating, very, very bad. I would not recommend anyone even take one sip of absinthe. It's very bad. You hallucinate from it. So yeah, not good. So like absinthe, and the water became like absinthe, and a multitude of people died because the waters were made toxic. And the fourth sounded, and a third of the sun was devoured, and a third of the moon, and a third of the stars. And a third of them became dark, and a third of the day did not appear, and the night likewise. And I heard, this is where it gets very controversial here. The majority of the manuscripts, even the Aramaic here, puts eagle. I always thought it should say angel here, but it seems like the majority of the manuscripts, seems like there's more witnesses for it being eagle here. So I guess it's supposed to be eagle. And I heard an eagle flying in the sky, which said, woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, from the sound of the trumpets of the three heavenly messengers who are going to sound. All right, so that's chapter 8. Here's the famous chapter here. Chapter 9, Revelations 9. And the fifth sounded, and I saw a star that fell from the sky to the earth, and a key of the pit of the abyss was given to it. And smoke came up from the pit like the smoke of a great furnace, which was heated, and the sun and the air were darkened by the smoke of the pit. And from the smoke, locusts went out over the earth, and power was given to them which the scorpions of the earth have. And it was told them not to harm the grass of the earth, neither any greenery nor the trees, but only the people who do not have the seal of Elohim on their foreheads. And it was given to them not to kill them, but that they would suffer pain for 5 months. And their torment was like the torment of a scorpion when it attacks a man. And in those days, people will seek death and will not find it, and they will long to die, and death will flee from them. Unfortunate side effect for those that take the mark. And the form of the locust was like the form of horses prepared for battle. And upon the heads was the crowns of the likeness of gold, and their faces were like faces of men. So these are not typical locusts. I can tell you right now.
No.
Got faces like men, body like a horse. Okay, centaurs maybe. They had hair like the hair of women, and their teeth were like those of lions. So you got lions' teeth, women's hair, men's faces, horse's body. Okay, and they had breastplates like the breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings. So now they have wings. Okay, was the sound of the chariots of many horses running to battle. And they had tails like scorpions, and a sting in their tails, and their authority is to hurt people for 5 months. And there is a king over them, the heavenly messenger of the abyss, whose name in Hebrew is Avadu, or I guess what would be before V? That would probably be Auadu. And in the Aramaic, his name is Sha'ua. Interesting. Interesting. One who is gone, behold, again 2 woes, or 1 woe is gone. Behold, again 2 woes are coming. After these things, the sixth heavenly messenger sounded. I heard one voice from the 4 horns of the altar of gold, which is before Elohim, which said to the 6th heavenly messenger that had a trumpet, loose the 4 heavenly messengers imprisoned at the great river Euphrates. So this would be like fallen angels basically imprisoned in the waters of the abyss, basically. Okay, so this would tie in with Second Peter, Jude, Enoch even talks about these angels that fell are imprisoned in Tartarus, you know. So this seems to be specific 4 messengers that fell that are being loosed out for Yahuwah's purpose. And it says, and those 4 Malachim were released who were prepared for an hour and for a day and for a month and for a year to kill 1/3 of the children of men. And the number of the army of the horsemen was 2 10,000 10,000s, and I heard their number. And in this way I saw the horses in a vision. Those sitting upon them had breastplates and of fire and chalcedony, brimstone, and heads of the horses were like the heads of lions. And fire and brimstone and smoke proceeded from their mouths. And by these 3 scourges, 1/3 of the children of men were killed by the fire, by the brimstone, by the smoke that proceeded from their mouths, because the power of the horses was in their mouths and also in their tails. And the rest of the children of men who were not killed by the scourges did not turn from the work of their hands to not worship devils and idols of gold and of silver and of brass and of wood and of stone, who do not see, neither hear, nor are able to walk. And they did not turn from their murders or from their witchcraft or from their whoring. Okay, and I saw another heavenly messenger who descended from heaven and wore a cloud and a rainbow of the sky on his head. His appearance was like the sun. So it seems like the consensus from most commentaries here is that this is Yahusha in the form of the angel of Yahuwah again. It seems like that's the case. Most commentaries are referencing Revelations 5:2, so they seem to all be indicating that. So his appearance was like the sun, his legs were like pillars of fire, and he had a small scroll opened in his hand. He placed his right foot on the sea, but left on the earth. And he shouted with a loud voice like a roaring lion. When he shouted, 7 thunders spoke with their voices. And when the 7th thunder spoke, I was ready to write, and I heard a voice from... Really? There's a... Hold on. I'm going to look at this really quick. So I want to see if that's supposed to say 7th heaven. Yeah, no.
Mine doesn't say 7th heaven.
Yeah, I don't agree with that translator going that. They're inserting bias there. Because it says, standing on the sea and on the land, lifted up his right hand to the sky and swore by him who lives forever and ever, who created heaven and the things that are in it, the earth and the things that are in it, and the sea and the things that are in it, that there will no longer be delay, but in the days of the voice of the 7th heavenly messenger, when he is about to sound, then the mystery of Elohim is finished, as he declared to his servants, the prophets. The voice which I heard from heaven again, speaking with me, said, go take the scroll which is open in the hand of the messenger who stands, the heavenly messenger who stands on the sea and on the land. And I went to the messenger, telling him to give me the little scroll. He said to me, take it, eat it, It will make your stomach bitter, but in your mouth it will be as sweet as honey. I took the little scroll out of the messenger's hand, ate it up. It was as sweet as honey in my mouth, and when I had eaten it, my stomach was made bitter. They told me, you must prophesy again about many peoples, nations, languages, and kings. Okay.
Okay. Chapter 11. The two witnesses. I was given a reed like a measuring rod and was told, go and measure the temple of Elohim and the altar and count the worshipers there. But exclude the outer court. Do not measure it because it has been given to the Gentiles. They will trample on the set-apart city for 42 months. And I will give power to my two witnesses, and they will prophesy
Can't hear you.
for 1,260 days. They can't hear me?
Yeah, you're gonna. Let me see if
Want me to move closer?
Yeah, you
No,
might.
there you go.
Yeah, you might have to move.
I'll
on
sit in the couch
more.
anyway. I need to move.
Yeah.
I need to move my position. Oh, I'm dizzy. Ooh.
No, it just seemed like it was a connection issue. You just cut out altogether. We could
Okay.
hear you fine, but
Nice to sit here. Okay, all right. So where I cut off there was, and I will give power to my two witnesses, and they will prophesy for 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. These are the two olive trees and the two lampstands that stand before Yahuwah of the earth. If anyone tries to harm them, fire comes from their mouths and devours their enemies. This is how anyone who wants to harm them must die. These men have power to shut up the sky so that it will not rain during the time they are prophesying, and they have power to turn the waters into blood and to strike the earth with every kind of plague as often as they want. Now, when they have finished their testimony, the beast that comes up from the abyss will attack them and overpower and kill them. Their bodies will be in the street of the great city, which is figuratively called Sodom and Egypt, where also their Elohim was crucified. For 3.5 days, men from every people, tribe, language, and nation will gaze on their bodies and refuse them burial. The inhabitants of the earth will gloat over them and will celebrate by sending each other gifts, because these two prophets had tormented those who lived on the earth. But after the 3.5 days, a breath of life from Yahuwah entered them, and they stood on their feet, and terror struck those who saved them. Then they heard a loud voice from heaven saying to them, "Come up here." And they went up to heaven in a cloud, while their enemies looked on. At that very hour, there was a severe earthquake, and 1/10 of the city collapsed. 7,000 people were killed in the earthquake, and the survivors were terrified and gave great esteem to Yahuwah of heaven. The second woe has passed. The third woe is coming soon. The seventh messenger sounded his trumpet, and there were loud voices in heaven which said, "The kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Elohim and of his Messiah, and he will reign forever and ever." And the 24 elders who were seated on the thrones before Yahuwah fell on their faces and worshiped Yahuwah, saying, "We give thanks to you, Master Yahuwah Almighty, who is and who was, because you have taken your great power and have begun to reign. The nations were angry, and your wrath has come. The time has come for judging the dead and for rewarding your servants, the prophets, and your saints, and those who reverence your name, both small and great, and for destroying those who destroy the earth." Then Yahuwah's temple in heaven was opened, and within his temple was seen the Ark of the Covenant. And there came flashes of lightning, rumbles, peals of thunder, an earthquake, and a great hailstorm. Chapter 12, the woman and the dragon. A great and wondrous sign appeared in heaven. A woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on his heads. His tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth. The dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth so that he might devour her child the moment that it was born. She gave birth to a son, a male child, who will rule all the nations with an iron scepter, and her child was snatched up to Yahuwah and to his throne. The woman fled into the desert to a place prepared for her by Yahuwah, where she might be taken care of for 1,260 days. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his messengers fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his messengers fought back, but he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth and his angels with him. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven say, "Now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdoms of Yahuwah and the authority of his Messiah. For the accusers of our brothers, who accuses them before Yahuwah day and night, has been hurled down. They overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. Therefore rejoice, you heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has gone down to you." Yeah, don't we know it? Okay. "He is filled with fury because he knows that his time is short. When the dragon saw that he had been hurled to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. The woman was given the 2 wings of a great eagle so that she might fly to the place prepared for her in the desert, where she would be taken care of for a time, times, and half a time, out of the serpent's reach. Then from his mouth the serpent spewed water like a river to overtake the woman and sweep her away with the torrent. But the earth helped the woman by opening its mouth and swallowing the river that the dragon had spewed out of his mouth. Then the dragon was enraged at the woman and went off to make war against the rest of her offspring, those who obey Yahuwah's commandments and hold to the testimony of Yahusha. And the dragon stood on the shore of the sea." I love that part where they're letting us know now you have to deal with him.
Yeah. I know there's different interpretations of the when that would have happened with Satan falling to the earth. I still hold, in my opinion, I can't prove it, but in my opinion, that that happened when Yahusha came to earth and was born of a baby. I still hold to that interpretation. He was not cast out until that moment. And I think some of the support that I remember from past studies would be multiple times in the New Testament, Yahusha is saying in a present tense, at this moment, the prince of the world has been cast out. Behold, I saw fall as lightning out of heaven. So it seems like he's trying to tell his disciples, like, this has happened either recently, just happened recently, or it happened right now. So to me, it seems very clear that he's hinting at Satan did not fall out of heaven in the garden.
No.
I know a lot of people believe that. There's like this tradition in Christianity that he's in the garden because that's after he fell. And I'm like, there's no biblical support for that, in my opinion. He didn't fall out of heaven physically to the earth when he's in the garden. He's choosing to be in the garden. Text makes it very clear. He went into the garden. It's not like he was cast out to the ground in the Garden of Eve. a Garden of Eden. So that's why I believe Revelations 12, where it talks about Satan being cast down physically to the Eretz, the earth, the land. It has to be around that time that the male child's being born, in my opinion. So that's kind of the personal opinion, personal view I have of that. That would be supported by a lot multiple verses.
I would agree with that.
In the New Testament scriptures, multiple verses.
Doug, Luke 21, verse 36 says that we have to be counted worthy to escape the great tribulation and stand before Yahusha. I believe that goes with Revelation 12, the last part.
Yeah, definitely.
I wrote a song about it, not to be done with just vocal and guitar, but it's actually written for choir and band. But I believe that what it's saying is that that'll be the last 3.5 years before Messiah returns. During the time of the Great Tribulation.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is one of the most confusing chapters interpretation-wise, because there's a lot of stuff John's throwing in there. He's being given a vision of, like, I don't believe, and I know a lot, like the general consensus is that, well, it's either has to be all past or all future. I'm of the opinion there's multiple fulfillments of this chapter.
Oh, yeah.
Certain events that happen in this chapter, there's multiple fulfillments. And this is just my opinion. I could be wrong, but I believe the woman can be interpreted both as Israel and Miriam, and just kind of give me a chance to explain that. As far as the woman being chased by the dragon, I believe that has to be multiple fulfillments.
Yeah.
Based on history, that it's a historical fact that Herod was possessed by Satan. Okay, he went to kill baby Yahusha as he was born, right? So that partially fulfills that. Okay, that pretty much all fulfills that as far as the male child is concerned. So I believe in my opinion that the woman can be represented by Israel as a whole, but also as a specific woman that was chosen to bear that male child. And that's kind of just my opinion.
I think so too.
That's kind of where I'm at. I'm not at the either or. I know there's different views on this, that some people either believe it's only talking about Israel, it's only talking about Miriam, like with the Catholics. I'm on neither side. I believe there's validity to both sides, and I'm kind of in the middle.
Verse 9, not verse 9, verse 6 is the one that talks about Miriam fleeing to the wilderness with her family to protect Yahusha.
Yeah, because you see that her and Yosef were in a type of wilderness when it happened to them, when Herod was chasing them, being possessed by the dragon. They went into Egypt. I know it wasn't 3.5 years. I get that point. I understand why people are reluctant to think it's Miriam, because she wasn't there for 3.5 years. But we really don't know, though.
We don't know how long they were there. We don't
know, and it's very possible Yahusha could have been like 3 years old by the time.
Yeah, it's very possible.
I'm just saying, we really don't know.
No, we don't know.
So I'm just saying, but I think it's multiple fulfillments in that chapter is the point I was bringing up. As far as the casting down of Satan, I think it's very clear that it happened at that time period and not before it. I know there's some people today that believe he hasn't been casted out yet, and it's an end times thing. I kind of disagree with that. I think he's been cast down for a while now. He's been on this earth wreaking havoc ever since Yahusha ascended, and Satan has been at work, knowing his time was short. And sometimes when you interpret that, people like to interpret his time as short as, oh, it's really short. We don't understand time in Yahuwah's point of view. So time is short could mean that he only had a couple of thousand years to start his deception. And he's like, okay, I gotta. Now we're getting into the first century AD. Okay, I got to start my deception really quick right now because I only
I
have.
believe there is a scripture where Yahusha says he saw Hashatan being cast out.
Yeah, that's what I brought up before. It's in Luke. Yep. And there's another place where present tense, he's talking to the disciples and in his ministry at probably 31 years of age, maybe 32 years of age, is getting close to the end of his ministry. He's like, at this time, the prince of this world has been casted out. So I'm just saying there's multiple Brit Hadashah scriptures that support my point of view of when he was casted out. So there's multiple. I think the idea, those that believe he was casted out in the garden have to be gap theorist people. You have to believe in gap theory because then you would have to believe Satan fell before Genesis 1-2. You would have to believe he fell somewhere in between day 1 and day 6 of creation, that he got cast down to the earth in between those days. That's how you would have to take that. Because if you believe he was good for the first 5 days of creation, there's no room for that to happen. It's all depends on people's view of what Genesis 1:1 to 1:2 is usually where you get the two schools of thought. I don't believe in the gap theory, so obviously that's why I believe Satan, as it states for the whole creation, was Tob until sin came in. So that means Satan was Tob until he deceived Adam and Kua, which would have been day 6. So that, that's kind of where I stand at this point in time. I don't believe in a pre-Adamite Luciferian rebellion. I know the 7-Day Adventists are big on that and certain groups are big on that, but I respectfully disagree with that. I think it's very clear. Scripture is very clear when sin originated, when the fall happened. It was day 6. So Satan would have became evil or had his fall from favor spiritually until day 6. So that means that if he's already in the garden and his fall didn't happen until day 6, there's no room for him to be cast down to the earth. So just to show why I believe what I believe.
I think we can know that Satan is cast out at this point.
Oh yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh yes.
Definitely.
Oh yes. He's far too visible around here.
The evidence is clearly there. The fact that this earth is so wicked that this country is practically at the point of legalizing bestiality at this point. You could say he's been on this Eretz for a while now. And this is his domain for a while now. I mean, don't get me wrong, he can still go in the firmament and be the principality of the power of the air. When he got cast out of heaven, that was the highest heaven. That doesn't mean that he can't be in the air with other principalities and do what he does, because we see that all the time. You see so-called UFOs in the clouds. That's most likely him and his little buddies, the 1/3 that fell down with him, doing what they want to do. Because
and he's probably laughing. Oh, look at them all thinking that it's a UFO. He's probably having a good laugh.
Because a lot of people assume that when it says there was no place found for him in heaven, they think that's all 3 heavens. To me, that, in my opinion, that's a huge assumption. I think when it says there's no place found for him in heaven, I think John's being specific, in my opinion.
Yeah,
He's talking about his throne room, the highest heaven. So that would not include the waters above the waters. That would not include the firmament either. So technically, Satan can still go around in the firmament and all that and do what he wants in the first heaven. But anyway, just my opinion.
I was noticing the mirroring from chapter 10 to Daniel chapter 12, where we have, and by him who swore, by him who lives forever, who stood with 1 foot. You see almost exactly the same mirroring in chapter 12 of Daniel.
Yeah.
Same person, in both places.
Yeah. I found it interesting, this commentator. I agree with some of his stuff here. I also agree with the year of the day that he puts for Yahusha's birth, for that specific event of the male child being born. The Hebraic Roots Bible translator believes he was born in 3 BC on the Feast of Trumpets. I actually agree. I know there's a huge debate in the Hebrew Roots, Torah, Messianic community, what feast day he would have been born on. I know a lot of people want to say Tabernacles because he dwelt among us. I get it. I'm more of the Feast of Trumpets side myself, just because I've seen the studies that our late brother Rob did about it, and I side with him because the timing wouldn't make sense for him to be during Tabernacles, mainly for the ritual of the circumcision on the 8th day. It would kind of mess it up. It would kind of just and I forget exactly what he said about it, but there seems to be there would be the amount of time that they would have to get him circumcised on the 8th day, wouldn't be able to do that and all that. So so that's my personal opinion. I believe he, like this commentator says, that he was born on the Feast of Trumpets on Yom Teruah. It would make sense to me because that's the date historically they coronated kings too. So kind of makes sense for Yahuwah to pick that day for his son to come into the world, to be the king of Yasharal and all that. So that's just my opinion. But anyway, so that's the conclusion of today's study. Thank you for joining us, everyone, and I hope this message was a baraka to you. I hope you learned something. Hope you learned something you might have not known before, maybe overlooked before in Scripture. Thank you for all of our people that have joined in and listened in today. And to all of our brothers and sisters out there in Yahuwah and Yahusha, have a great rest of your Sabbath. Shabbat Shalom.